So I've been hearing a lot about this narrative that Steph Curry isn't the best defender in the world and that he's actually pretty bad at it. So I'm here to dispel that. But I'm also going to show you how he is a pretty good defender without being the most athletic guy in the world. To me, he actually is pretty damn athletic, but when we look at it from an explosiveness standpoint, he's really not up to par with a lot of these best defenders in the league, but he still gets it done. So let's check it out. So number one, even just looking at his stats, everything is pretty damn good, with the exception of isolation. Now, I'm not a huge stat guy, to be honest. I definitely go more by the eye test and just analysis, but what that would usually mean is that in terms of pure one-on-one defense against high-level NBA guards, he's not necessarily locked down, but he's a really good situational defender, which means he knows how to use his help. He knows how to maneuver screens. He knows context and tendencies. He closes out well, which is why outside of ISO, he's pretty damn good. So we'll check out how he does it. So in terms of closeouts, one thing is that he really makes an effort to get his hands up early, especially when the shooter is showing a shot, which is obviously an easy psychological tool to throw off that shot even by just a bit. While this obviously makes him slower getting there, he's able to move pretty well with his hands overhead, which allows him to bother that shot and get out to the shooter simultaneously. It also always seems like he knows where his help defense is. When you close out even without shading the offensive player either way, it can be tough because they have all the options in the world now. So you'll see Curry close out to one side of the shooter, but when they drive past him, his help is right there. It's about being conscious of where they are. At the end of the day, he faces so many closeouts that he probably knows what makes a good closeout. I don't know, could make a difference. And then finally here, the way you see him playing offense, flying around, sprinting across the court, seemingly never getting tired. Oh, it's on defense too. That's what's so impressive. He's constantly making rotations from all the way across the court. He never gives up on a closeout. I wouldn't be surprised if he's covering the most ground out of anyone on the court defensively too. Next up, pick and roll. The big thing to understand about the pick and roll is that even if you don't completely blow up that screen, even a slight alteration in their angle can change the entire course of the play. Like here, if Curry didn't push him a bit wide off the screen and he was able to take this tight angle downhill, that lane would have been there. Instead, he's kind of pushed towards Clay and Looney, and it's a turnover instead of an easy driving lane. So a lot of it is really just slightly altering how that offense uses the screen. The Warriors also switch a decent amount of screens, and many teams take advantage of this, trying to get Steph on a switch. So usually one of two things happen. They switch and Steph is able to use his help and positioning to do his best, or he'll show almost like a big man and just buy time until that original defender gets back. Since he's agile and from the offensive standpoint understands how this works, he definitely hedges this better than most bigs. And he's gotten really good at the timing that it takes to slow them down just a little bit until that defender gets back without fully leaving his man. And then at the end of the day, rule number one on screens, you can't just die on that screen. Even if that screen completely gets you, eventually that big is going to roll or pop and you've got to get back into the play. So Steph is pretty damn good at that. Even if he's completely caught and he's going to be late getting back into the play, he'll be there the fastest he can. In terms of just movement and general defense, his hand placement is usually pretty good as well. Sometimes he'll fall victim to a little reach, but who doesn't? For the most part, he's solid at keeping both arms straight out, even exaggerating it most times, or at least one arm fully visible to the ref and one active on the ball or legally bracing the contact. And even when he's moving at a high speed laterally, he's pretty good at doing this with a fully straightened arms, not only to avoid a foul but to expand his frame, which is undoubtedly tough. But he's also gotten really good at knowing the exact moments when the offensive player shows that ball and swiping in right then to get an easy steal, especially when getting bumped back, just not being the most massive guy in the world. This is a good way to still get a stop instead of leaving a good amount of space for a shot. His anticipation is also really solid. When you've been in the league for so long and you're as dedicated as he seems to improving his defense, it's not a surprise that he's really picked up the ability to beat ball handlers to the spot based off their tendencies, the situation, and more. But sometimes obviously he will get beat, and you'll notice that he's constantly rotating to turn and move in different directions, which many great defenders are able to do as they sprint to cut players off, even if it's just a stride or two and then turning back. And again, he's really good at quickly scoring back up to the offensive player, especially upon contact. So overall, I don't want to hear much more about the narrative Steph can't defend. It's not only due to the numbers, but when we actually break down his defense, that we can see that he's actually a really high level defender. If you want more content like this, make sure to check me out on Instagram at ByAnyMeansBasketball and stay tuned for a lot more. Thanks for tuning in.